Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I am your host, guiding you through the cases that have moved through the courts and reached a conclusion, but have left the public divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth? Well, that's another story. Now imagine this. You're watching a political superstar, a young, charismatic figure with all the makings of a future president. They promise change and hope and a better tomorrow. But behind closed doors, that same person is making decisions that betray the very ideals they claim they stand for. Choices that not only risk their career, but destroy the trust of those closest to them. What happens when the pressure of public life and the pursuit of power leads someone to compromise their values and cross ethical lines even they never imagined? They are making decisions that will ultimately destroy their career, their reputation, and their family. What really happens when the pressure of political success and the need to maintain a perfect image leads someone down a path they cannot come back from? In this episode, we are diving into the case of John Edwards, a man who went from being a rising political star to a central figure in one of the most scandalous falls from grace in modern American politics. This isn't about party lines, guys. This is not about political ideologies. It's about the influence of power and ambition. Whether Republican or Democrat does not matter here, okay? The pressures of public life often bring out the best or worst in people, and it doesn't matter what side of the line you're on, and that is not a discussion here. I'm making that clear. This is not Republican or Democrat. This is about getting into political power and what happens. And I want that to be very clear. This is about one man in a position. Edwards' story is a story about ambition, deception, and the consequences of living a double life. He was a senator. He was a vice presidential nominee and a contender for the presidency. But behind his polished public image, Edwards was hiding a secret, an extramarital affair with a filmmaker working for his campaign. When the affair came to light, it wasn't just his marriage that unraveled. Federal investigators alleged that Edwards had used campaign funds to cover up the affair, leading to charges of campaign finance violations. But Edwards' case is about more than just scandal. It's a window into the pressures of political life and how influence can push even the most promising figures to make unethical choices. Was Edwards driven by the need to protect his image at all costs? Was he simply another politician succumbing to power and greed? What is it? Stick with me as we unpack the rise and fall of John Edwards. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have the chance to decide for yourself, was this a case of influence gone wrong, or was this a personal failing that had nothing to do with politics? John Edwards was a man who had it all: a thriving political career, a devoted wife, and the admiration of millions. He was charismatic, polished, and seen by many as a beacon of hope in American politics. But as his star rose, so did the pressure to maintain the illusion of perfection. For Edwards, that pressure became too much to bear, and the cracks in his carefully constructed facade began to show. Let's start with the facts. Edwards first gained national attention as a U.S. Senator from North Carolina, building a reputation as a champion for working-class Americans. His 2004 vice presidential run alongside John Kerry cemented his status as a rising star in the Democratic Party. And by the time the 2008 presidential race began, Edwards was seen as a strong contender for the highest office in the land. But behind the scenes, Edwards was carrying a secret that would ultimately destroy his career. During his 2008 campaign, he was engaged in an extramarital affair, and this was with Betrayal Hunter, a filmmaker hired to document his journey. The affair resulted in the birth of a child, a fact Edwards denied for years, even as rumors and tabloid headlines swirled. The scandal escalated when federal investigators alleged that Edwards had used campaign funds to cover up this affair, paying for Hunter's living expenses and travel to keep her out of the public eye. This case led to a high-profile trial where Edwards faced charges of conspiracy, filing false campaign finance reports, and accepting illegal contributions. The fallout was catastrophic. Edwards' wife, Elizabeth, who was battling terminal cancer at the time, separated from him. His political career was over, his reputation in tatters. Legally, Edwards faced federal charges for allegedly using nearly $1 million in campaign funds to cover up this affair. Prosecutors claimed the money was used to pay Betrayal Hunter's expenses and ensure she stayed out of the public eye during his presidential campaign. Edwards was charged with conspiracy, filing false campaign finance reports, and accepting illegal campaign contributions. Now, in 2012, he goes to trial, and after weeks of testimony and intense media coverage, the jury acquitted him on one count of accepting illegal campaign contributions. However, they deadlocked on the other charges, resulting in a mistrial. Federal prosecutors ultimately decided not to retry him, leaving this case legally unresolved. And Edwards walked away a free man, but the damage to his personal and professional life was already done. But this case now raises broader questions about the pressures of political life and the lengths to which people will go to protect their image. And so here's the real question. Was Edwards a victim of political influence, driven to make unethical choices by the demands of public life? Or was this a purely personal failing, unrelated to the pressures of his career? And more importantly, what does this case say about the intersection of power and influence and morality in American politics? Okay, well, let's look at the facts here around John Edwards. His rise to political prominence, it seemed almost too good to be true. A successful trial lawyer, he won national recognition for championing the rights of the working class American. He used his charm and charisma to connect with voters. His 2004 vice presidential campaign, alongside John Kerry, solidified his place as one of the Democratic Party's brightest stars. By 2008, Edwards seemed poised to make a serious run for the presidency. But behind the polished speeches and promises of hope lay a man struggling to maintain the image he had built. And it wasn't just Edwards who carried the weight of this illusion. His entire campaign, his family, and the American public were invested in his success. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. During his 2008 campaign, Edwards' affair with Betrayal Hunter began to surface. It wasn't just the personal betrayal that shocked the public, it was the lengths to which Edwards allegedly went to keep it all hidden. The use of nearly $1 million in campaign funds to support Hunter and conceal the affair raised serious questions about integrity and legality and accountability. This scandal, however, is just one example, guys, of a phenomenon that feels almost inherent to political life, doesn't it? From extramarital affairs to financial corruption, the public has seen countless politicians fall prey to the pressures of power. The Edwards case is not unique, it's emblematic. What is it about political positions that seem to erode the very values leaders promise to uphold? Is it the constant scrutiny? Is it the hunger for power? or maybe the compromises required to navigate the political machine. This is why trust in politicians continues to erode. The Edwards scandal reinforced the public's perception that politics is a game played behind closed doors, with loyalty, morality, and accountability often sacrificed for success. It makes us question not just the individual, but the entire system. Who is playing this game? How can we as the public discern between genuine leaders and those merely skilled at wearing the mask? John Edwards became the poster child for these questions, not just because of his fall from grace, but because his story felt like one we have seen too many times before. The fallout of John Edwards' scandal wasn't just personal. This was a public unraveling of a man and a system that many people had already begun to distrust. When news of his affair broke, Edwards initially denied everything, claiming loyalty to his wife Elizabeth, who was battling terminal cancer. But as evidence mounted, the truth came out, and the public's shock turned into anger and disillusionment. The accusation of misusing campaign funds pushed the scandal beyond a moral failing into the realm of criminal behavior. The trial of 2012 became a media spectacle as prosecutors argued that Edwards had knowingly accepted nearly $1 million in illegal contributions to cover up the affair and protect his political ambitions. For his part, Edwards maintained that the funds were personal gifts meant to keep the affair private and spare his wife additional pain. It was not to influence his campaign. Legally, Edwards avoided conviction, yes. He was acquitted on one count of accepting illegal contributions, and a mistrial was declared on the remaining charges. And of course, this makes the public question everything. Federal prosecutors opted not to retry him, but in the court of public opinion, the damage was already done. Edwards' political career was over, and his name became synonymous with betrayal and hypocrisy. What makes this case even more significant is how it highlights a recurring theme in politics: the disconnect between the public promises of leaders and their private actions. Edwards is not the first politician to fall from grace in this way, and he will not be the last. The public has seen this cycle before, though. Politicians rising to power on platforms of integrity and hope, only to succumb to the pressures and temptations of their positions, and ultimately ending up millionaires. Why does this happen so often? Some argue that politics itself fosters an environment where compromise is not just inevitable, but necessary for survival. The need to win elections, maintain alliances, and manage public perception can push even the most well-intentioned individuals to make choices they might otherwise completely avoid. Others point to the intoxicating nature of power, which can blur ethical boundaries and erode personal accountability. We've seen this over and over again. The Edwards case forces us to confront these uncomfortable realities. We see them every day, and it's not just about one man's mistakes. It's about a system that seems to encourage or at least tolerate such behavior, and it leaves us asking, can anyone truly remain unchanged by the pressures of political life? Is it possible? When it comes to John Edwards' downfall, the arguments are as divided as the emotions it provokes. On one side, critics argue that Edwards' actions were a direct result of personal failings, a betrayal of his values, his family, and the public trust. On the other side, some see his story as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of political ambition and the pressures that come with it. So let's start with the personal argument. Edwards' affair with Rielle Hunter wasn't a result of political maneuvering. This was a choice he made as an individual, For many, this was a clear betrayal of his wife Elizabeth, who stood by his side throughout his career, even while battling cancer. Edward's subsequent denial and efforts to conceal the affair only compounded the perception of him as a man willing to lie to anyone, including his family, to save himself. This argument sees Edwards not as a victim of political pressure, but as someone who used politics as a shield to justify unethical behavior. After all, the misuse of campaign funds to cover up the affair, whether legal or not, shows a willingness to exploit the very system he claimed to champion. But others argue that Edwards' actions cannot be separated from the environment of politics itself. The constant scrutiny, the relentless need to project a perfect image, and the stakes of a presidential campaign, they create immense pressure. In this context, Edwards' choices might be seen as a desperate attempt to protect his career and his family from public scandal, a reaction to the overwhelming demands of political life. Then there's also the question of systemic influence. Edwards wasn't the first, nor will he be the last politician to fall into scandal. The culture of politics often rewards those who can navigate its murky waters, even if it means compromising their values. From this perspective, Edwards' story is less about one man's failings and more about a broader system that encourages secrecy and deception and self-preservation at any cost. So, was John Edwards a man who let his personal desires destroy his career? Or was he just another politician swept up in the toxic pressures of a system that reward power over principles? Maybe the answer is somewhere in between. As we dig deeper, it becomes clear that John Edwards' case is a reflection of larger issues within politics. How power and image and influence can create an environment ripe for ethical lapses. While Edwards' actions were his own, they didn't occur in a vacuum. The political machine he was a part of, and perhaps beholden to, played a significant role. Consider the pressure of maintaining an impeccable public image. For candidates like Edwards, perfection isn't just an aspiration, it's a requirement. Every single smile, every speech, every campaign stop is meticulously crafted to project an idealized version of the candidate. In this context, when something threatens to break that illusion, like an affair or scandal, the instinct to cover it up can become overwhelming. Some argue that Edwards' use of campaign funds was driven by this pressure to maintain control over the narrative. Protecting his image wasn't just about his career. It was about safeguarding his platform, his supporters, and the people who had invested in his success. From this perspective, Edwards' actions, while unethical, were also a reaction to the impossibly high stakes of modern politics. But that doesn't absolve him, does it? Critics point out that Edwards' choices reflect a deeper issue, the willingness of politicians to sacrifice integrity for the sake of ambition. Misusing campaign funds wasn't just a misstep, it was a betrayal of public trust, and for many emblematic of a system where power takes precedence over principles, where personal accountability becomes secondary to political survival. And then there's the question of systemic complicity. Edwards operated in a political culture where such scandals are all too common. Affairs, financial misconduct, and cover-ups are hardly unique to him. This raises the uncomfortable question: is the system itself broken? If so many politicians succumb to the same temptations, can we really hold them to the standards they claim to represent? Or is the problem not just with individuals, but with the nature of political life itself? In the end, John Edwards' case leaves us grappling with a dilemma. Are politicians like him victims of a flawed system, Or are they simply exploiting that system for personal gain? Something they know all too well, even going into this whole thing. And if it is both, what does that mean for how we hold leaders accountable? The controversy surrounding John Edwards isn't just about his personal failings. It's about what his story represents. At its core, this case raises questions about the nature of power, the pressures of political life, and the public's enduring distrust of politicians. For many, Edwards' actions confirmed a long-standing belief that politicians cannot be trusted. The affair, the cover-up, and the misuse of campaign funds all reinforced the idea that public figures often prioritize their own survival over integrity. And this perception isn't unique to Edwards. This is a recurring theme in political scandals. From Watergate to more recent controversies, the pattern is strikingly familiar. Power corrupts, and transparency becomes a casualty. We see it all the time. But Edwards' case also sparked a broader debate about the influence of political systems on personal behavior. Critics argue that the relentless demands of modern politics, the constant media scrutiny, the need for fundraising, and the expectation of perfection create a toxic environment. In this context, even well-intentioned individuals can find themselves making compromises they never imagined. The public response to Edwards' scandal was divided. Some saw him as a cautionary tale, a man who let ambition cloud his judgment, while others viewed him as a symptom of a larger issue, where the system itself incentivizes secrecy and rewards those who play the game well. For his supporters, the trial and media coverage felt like a pile-on, as though Edwards was being punished more harshly than others who commit similar acts. And then there's the question of legacy. Edwards was once seen as a leader who could inspire change, but his fall left many wondering how much of his image was even real. Was he ever the man he claimed to be? Or was the public sold a persona crafted for political gain? This uncertainty lingers, fueling distrust in not just Edwards, but the political process as a whole. Ultimately, the Edwards scandal forces us to confront a difficult truth. When power, influence, and image take center stage, morality often takes a back seat. And for the public, the challenge remains. How do we hold leaders accountable without losing faith in the system entirely? John Edwards' case is just one in a long line of political scandals that have eroded public trust. Each new revelation, an affair, a financial misconduct, or an abuse of power, it all reinforces the idea that politicians are more interested in preserving their own positions than really serving the people, which is their position. And for many, this cycle of betrayal feels both exhausting and inevitable, which is not okay. But here is the question. Why don't we as a society do more about this? Americans consistently report low levels of trust in politicians. It's in the news. It's talked about it all of the time. Yet the same systems that breed corruption remain largely unchanged. Is it resignation? Is it a belief that this is just the way things are? Or is it the complexity of the political machine, where accountability feels out of reach for the average person? Has the American forgot that the government works for them? Those few are supposed to serve the people, and if they are not serving the public's best interest, it is up to the public to make that change. But we don't. Have Americans forgotten? I mean, There's also the question of complicity. Do we as voters allow this behavior by rewarding charisma over substance? I mean, they get us going between the politicians and the media, and once you're excited, is that just how we're making decisions and accepting wrongs? I mean, by accepting scandals as it's just part of the game. I mean, these questions may not have simple answers, but they are worth asking, because until we address why distrust in politics has become the norm, stories like John Edwards will continue to play out. The people will continue to watch and complain. We will shake our heads, but we will do nothing about it, and we will wait until the next headline. It's up to the people. Okay, people? That is how America is and what it is built on as Americans stand by. John Edwards' story is not just about him. It is about all of us. It's about the systems we trust, the leaders we choose, and the standards we are willing to hold them to. His case is a mirror reflecting our frustrations with politics and the uneasy truth that these scandals are both shocking and predictable. Predictable. We can predict them, and we accept that. And now it's your turn to decide here. Was John Edwards a victim of the political pressures that came with power? A man swept up in a system that rewards secrecy and punishes vulnerability? Or were his actions purely personal, a series of choices that betrayed his values and the trust of those around him? And perhaps the bigger question, what does his story say about the system itself? Are scandals like this a failure of individuals, or are they baked into the fabric of modern politics? For some, Edwards' fall is a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition. For others, it's proof that politics often rewards the very behaviors it claims to condemn. Either way, the questions that his story raises go beyond one man. They're about us as a society and the accountability we demand, or don't, from those in power. Public opinion is everywhere. Whether it's a subject you like or not, or are comfortable with or not, public opinion is always there behind the scenes, driving everything. Anything you're interested in, even the things you're not. It's how it is. And that's why we do this podcast. We are all a part of this. Scandals like John Edwards are not just headlines. They are reminders of the disconnect between public service and self-preservation. And while it's easy, for us to point fingers at politicians, the real question is, what are we doing about it? Why have we accepted that power corrupts? Why have we accepted that scandals are inevitable and that politicians will always put their interests first? This is not about party lines or political ideologies. I will say it again. That is not what this podcast is about. No sides here. I want to be very clear. This is about holding leaders to the standards they claim to represent and refusing to settle for anything less. Because when scandals become the norm, trust is the casualty, and without trust, the system itself starts to break down. So as we end this episode, I challenge you to think about the role we all play in shaping the future of politics, because if we don't demand better, nothing will change. And maybe, in the eyes of the public, in public opinion, that's okay. Or is it? Thank you for joining me in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there. Stay curious and ask the difficult questions. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.